Today I'd like to give you some ideas of what not to do with resin. Here I have a spectacular display of a fail with resin. Let's see. So I started out by thinking it was a great idea to use tuck tape is great. This is this red tape. I'll show you how it looks. Get it from Amazon. This stuff is the best. Nothing sticks to this. So I've learned that much. However, I thought that putting some hot glue under the end of my board that I'm planning to pour in, I put hot glue around all the edges, and I thought it was sealed up really nicely. I did not clamp it down. Big mistake. But I thought that given I had put hot glue under the board and around all the edges, that would be enough to create a barrier that this would not go through. Yet somehow it found a way. It found a great way, because this was filled all the way to the top when I did my pour. I filled it to the top, and then I used my butane torch and I got all the bubbles out, and it looked great. Nothing was leaking. I checked it. I'm like, oh, this looks great. So I moved on to my next board because I had extra resin, and I decided I would add some of the extra resin in here, put some orange, fill that up. This too was filled up, but I knew this one wasn't well connected, and I had a feeling I would have some leaking, and that was okay. I just wanted to use up the resin. And then I looked over at this board where I wasn't paying attention and noticed that not only had it sunk, but it was pouring over the sides onto here, going into all this, coming close to my tools. It was making a ginormous mess and wasting a ton of really expensive resin. So, luckily my husband happened to walk in at that moment, and I yelled, grab clamps, and we put clamps on all of these corners to try to clamp this down. It didn't help all that much, honestly. It still was leaking, and in the end I lost more than half the resin I had poured in here. Also, learned a little more. Wood gases off on its own. Therefore, as if you pour something into wood, you need to seal it first with some resin. If you don't do that, it's going to do this. All those lovely little bubbles there, which now that I'm stuck with them dry, I'm going to have to probably use a Dremel tool with a sander on it to try to sand out these bubbles before I pour the next layer, because you're going to see that down in there if I just pour right on top. So, fantastic. So this is going to leave me with a lot of work. The other issue I'm going to have is trying to get this off this board. I may actually have to completely saw the edges and run this through my planer to plane it down to the bottom of this, because I'm not sure that I'm ever getting this off of here. I'm going to try, but it may not be successful. So that'll be yet another challenge. But first things first, now that it is all sealed up beautifully, because the resin's not going anywhere else at this point, I can go ahead and fill the rest of this cavity in once I manage to get all of these air bubbles out. So it pained my heart to destroy what looked like glass, but as I've read on most of the forums, if you wait more than 10 hours to do your second pour, you need to scuff up the surface. And I can only hope that they aren't lying to me, because I'm hoping when I pour the next coat of resin on, you're not going to see all of this white destroyed areas that I've ruined with my grinder and sander, sandpaper, everything. But we will see. Okay, it's been a day and a half, and now it is finally time to remove this from the board. And it did turn out really nice. I do see in the center a little bit of the bubbles in the line there, but really overall it looks good. Getting this off may not be the easiest thing, but I'm going to try to pry this apart. So this tuck tape is great, but I think what I'm going to need to do is go around the corners with an X-Acto knife, or actually a utility knife, and I'm going to need to cut this resin free from the tuck tape, just so that this will actually release. Maybe, just maybe, I can break this free. Maybe. Probably gonna use a hammer or something, but not the easiest thing to do. Alright, we're gonna pry it with a screwdriver and hammer. And that worked. So you can see it came right off wherever the tuck tape was. It's only where it connected to the wood that I had a problem. So I'm going to get this released from here and I'll be right back. Ta-da! I got it off. Alright, so you can see it didn't stick to this at all. It stuck around the edges where it dripped off. And this was all because I didn't clamp it down. Didn't help much. So now I've got a board that is clear. You can see that there is all the pieces of tuck tape left impressions here. So what I need to do next is do a whole lot of cutting, planing, and get this thing back to wood and epoxy only. Now just to give you an idea, this board at this point has been sanded with a, let's see, I did a 60 grit, an 80 grit, a 120, and a 240. And as you can see, it's cloudy looking. Doesn't look real great yet. That's because to get epoxy back up to looking like glass, you've got to go a lot higher. So I have to go through about 10 to 15 more grits of sandpaper, and then I will be back to show you how it looks. Okay, so I just put the resin coat on this. The light is glaring off of it, but you can see it's looking really good and shiny and clear, which is great. I didn't sand it as high as I could have, just because if you're going to put resin on it, it's kind of pointless to sand it forever, but there it is drying, and I'll have to do the other side as well once it's done. And here is the board all finished. I did do probably a couple more coats of resin on this because I kept finding bubbles and things that were bothering me, so I would have to sand it off and put another coat on. But this is all done. And on the sides, I ended up just sanding it down and then going all the way up to like 12,000 grit sandpaper and putting a little oil on it and not worrying about how much resin was on there. But I'm happy with the result in the end. It was definitely a challenge, but I learned some things from it, so hopefully I'll make sure to do better next time. Thanks for watching.